honestly has inspired my entire research. And this word is Sonder.
Have you heard about the Bonini's paradox?
Have you heard of this candle problem?
No, what is that? Can you tell us who are going to be the next guests? But I really want to know about what your inner intrinsic motivation of having guests.
It's currently a futuristic idea, right, of using signals generated from different types of sources. It's more so kind of seeing the vision of something that's already out there that we can use to kind of leverage. All right, Santiago, so welcome back. And for me, this just takes me down like memory lane when you helped me out on the other podcast, my class project. But now, this is an official one. How does it feel to be the first guest?
Well, I feel very honored.
Amazing.
Thank you for inviting me again to this new project that you have. And
of course, yeah. And I feel like, first of all, I'm excited and thank you for being like my soundboard. And I know we've already talked briefly about this idea, this vision, but yeah, I do feel like you're like the right person to kind of like dissect not only the idea, but like the science behind the idea. Because, I mean, one could potentially be delusional in an idea, right? But I feel like this is more so aspirational than delusional because this vision is really backed up by data. And I'm just like tired of just like being in this small bubble. And I feel like it's one thing to just like keep doing research and writing papers, right? It's important, right? We're just transferring the knowledge to this world. But it's another thing to kind of start telling people how the work we're doing can really impact the lives of people. So we want to kind of move towards this idea of like analytical to clinical utility. I guess we can just start by giving the viewers a background of who we are and the work we're doing and how it can really impact the world, right? So I'm a PhD student and I have this general interest in using behavioral games to study mental health. And as you know, we both do this, right? And I'm specifically using games to study paranoia, which is like this belief that the world is out to get you and people are trying to harm you, as well as psychosis. And psychosis is basically this distorted perception of reality, causing one to really like feel, see, and believe things that are not real. And so we can imagine how this could really impact the way people navigate the world. So from the comfort of their homes, instead of going into like brain scans, people can just play these games and they can get their own like personalized assessment of their mental health profile. And with this idea that I'm going to talk more about, they're not only going to get this readout, but I feel like the data is kind of showing that at a granular and more potentially accurate level with signals or frequencies, we can understand people's mental health. And it's really interesting because we're all humans, we're actually made up of signals. And so why not kind of leverage this idea of extracting these signals or frequencies to kind of study mental health? And so that's kind of like the brief overview. We'll have more episodes on like what the research we're actually doing. But Santiago, do you want to kind of introduce yourself?
yes, of course.
Yep.
First, thank you again for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I want to congrats your motivation first to you have been building up science stage by stage, and now that your new discoveries and your new research are leading you to new research ideas and papers, but also I really respect that you want to use that for helping the community. So I really congrats for that. And it's something that I also in my particular life, I have the necessity or the feeling and the will to do some translation between the work on the science papers and to do things for also other people.
Absolutely. That's one of the biggest things I really admire about you too. So your enthusiasm for science and you want to actually help people too. So
hopefully one day.
Yeah, we'll do it together. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
So in my case, I arrived to the US a year ago, working on the same group as you, where we study paranoia and psychosis in general. I did my PhD in experimental psychology. So before that, I did a master's in behavior analysis. So my whole recent many years, like 8, I would say 7, has been developing behavioral tasks for animals, pigeons, rats, and humans, and then to try to explain why these animals, including humans, do whatever do given the conditions that we present, and also how can we model those behaviors.
Sure.
And yeah, so I guess we can call these tasks games as well, which in order to make it a bit funnier for people.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believe that the mental health prediction or diagnosis would benefit for automatization at the screening level. So if we would be able to know before a psychotic breakdown happened,
Yeah.
if we would have a red light or a attention,
Yep.
that would be very useful for many families and for many countries at the public level, at the mental health public level.
Sure, yeah.
So
you're basically saying like historically, people have or patients have gone to clinicians. They would do these assessments, and then they would get some kind of like clinical phenotyping of their symptoms, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now it's kind of going towards, instead of having patients go to clinicians, they can play these games, and from playing these games, they can generate these like, you can say like signals, right? That can serve as markers for the profile. So it's like a more scalable and more like objective and faster way than like having...
Cheap, easy to implement, massive. But I think there is very important to say that at the end, the gold standard will be always the clinician.
Sure.
But one of the attempts of our area, computational psychiatry, I guess, is provide screening data before people arrive to the clinicians.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, there in general, clinical psychologists and psychiatrists per population in Mexico, is the data I know, it's lower than the suggested from the World Health Organization.
Sure.
So how can we address the problem? So one possibility is telemedicine, but also the other is detecting risks of psychosis or any psychopathology by, why not, computerized games?
Amazing, yeah, okay. So basically not removing human interaction, but supplement that with these other more advanced...
I like the supplementation. And on these games, I guess there is a lot of signals on embedded in this, on the properties of how people play, and they choose the responses. So
absolutely,
I guess this is something that you like a lot.
Yeah. Chess is like something that I've been raised with, right? Like, and it's been actually very helpful, not only like with building an interest, but also just like my personal growth. And I think we'll get into this, but I feel like pattern recognition is one of like the most useful skills you can gain from just playing chess, as well as just like visual learning too, right? If you've seen like Queen's Gambit, and like even chess players just looking up into the sky and like thinking, like they're literally visualizing the chessboard. Now we have like masters playing blindfold chess, and like not even looking at the board, but listening to people's moves, and then being like, okay, in like 12 or 13 moves, they just know
perfect representation of the board.
Exactly, right? So again, like these games could easily be used to study mental health experience.
So I guess also a difference between chess and the games that we use is that we try to make them simpler as possible.
Absolutely.
In order to be able to model the simplest component. And have you had any insights with respect to the tasks and the games that you use with any psychopathology?
Yeah,
I want to hear about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are many games out there that people use, right? The first game I would say that got me into this field of computational psychiatry or using games to study mental health is, just imagine like a simple casino task. So you go to a casino and you're faced with two types of slot machines. So you have two types of people. You have the experimenter and then the participant. Okay. So the experimenter is the one who kind of designs the game, and the participant is the one who's playing the game. So say, for example, the participant is faced with these two slot machines, and the experimenter knows that one slot machine is more rewarding than the other slot machine. But the experimenter has given the participant the task to figure out which machine is most rewarding. So this is a simple two-armed bandit task game. So we have like a more, not, I wouldn't say more complicated game, but a game that increases the number of slot machines. So instead of two, we have now three, for example. So we have a game called the probabilistic reversal learning game, which is like instead of a two choice, basically a 3-choice game. And we'll go in more detail later in different episodes, but essentially we use these games to study paranoia. And all of these games are typically decision-making games. Uncertainty or changes in the environment is important to kind of dissect what's going on in the brain. And if you think of paranoia is like this idea that, or how does paranoia come about? People are typically paranoid when they're uncertain or they don't know what's going to happen. If the world was kind of certain and everyone knew like what to do, no one would kind of be paranoid. That's in my head. But uncertainty is the one that's a driving factor for paranoia. And when we add changes to this probabilistic reversal learning game, we kind of emulate or mimic this reality where people enter these different environments with uncertainty, and so we can better test paranoia in that case. So to directly answer your question, we have this game called the PRL, which we kind of use to study paranoia and psychosis.
This makes me think there is this Scottish psychiatrist,
Okay.
Lang. I think his last name was Lang.
Mm-hmm.
And he has this concept of schizophrenia called that people with psychosis or in a psychotic episode, they have what he refers as ontological insecurity.
Okay.
So ontological is metaphysical insecurity, that there, if I correctly understand it, probably somebody can correct me, that there is the sense that the self of these people has not certainty of being the self in the next moment. So metaphysically, they have uncertainty about if I turn my back, the wall is going to be there. I'm going to be the same person in the next moment. So at the very core, pure of the self, he described that there is this ontological, which is ontological, metaphysical insecurity, which I think it might be related with some volatility or some uncertainty, because if you're not certain about yourself being yourself in the next moment, all the potential cognitive symptoms might emerge because at the main core is disrupted.
I see. So is this the idea of phenomenology?
This is one of the psychopathologists, phenomenologists in psychiatry.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense, right? Like, if one doesn't really understand their self, they can kind of like go into like outside reality and have potential like delusional experiences, hallucinatory experiences. Yeah. It makes sense to better understand the self. I
think it's a good complement between these clinical phenomenologist people and the computational work that we do. I think there is an area of convergence that has not been fully and formally explored yet.
But and I think virtual reality could be like a method to kind of study this too, right?
Yeah. I haven't seen many studies about that yet, but we should, at the Woodside Institute, we have the virtual reality matrix. We should get used to that more.
Do something about that, I know there's a researcher that does understanding of the self using virtual reality, but maybe that's another guest to kind of invite, right?
Daniel Freeman, I think he does that. We can invite him.
Absolutely, I'm actually going to invite him, I think. Cool. Virtual reality and different types of phobias,
psychosis.
Right?
Phobias.
Phobias too, I think.
Yeah.
Cool. So I think maybe we should like transition into what this is all about, right? People kind of know us now. Now we can kind of transition into this podcast, right? Like, why even do this podcast?
Yeah, I wonder a lot. We have briefly talked, but I really want to know about what your inner intrinsic motivation of having guests and talking about your work and the signal processing that you do, that I hope at some point you talk more about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, first of all, like the first few episodes that are going to be hosted, right, are just trial runs. This is obviously my first time doing all of this, so I don't even know like what the right thing to do, what's not the right thing to do. So I really want the viewers to kind of engage and like provide some insight into what we can kind of improve upon too, and potentially also just remove. So the key thing is I really want to create some kind of flow state, like a pipeline that will kind of make things easier. So flow state with the podcast filming, the presenting, and also the editing as well. And I'm going to be making this transition from this temporary space to a more permanent space. And once that move happens, I know for a fact that there's going to be a lot more consistency. So,
and what is the main idea of the podcast, and what is PSYGNALZ that you want to introduce?
I'm seeing this podcast as split into 3 phases. Okay, so the first phase is all about exciting the viewers for what's to come, engaging them for what they kind of want to know, and educating them on what they don't know and what we might actually provide to them. And yeah, it's just all about like talking about just the human experience and psychology. And I feel like we all have our own stories. There's this word that honestly has inspired my entire research, and this word is Sonder.
Sonder.
Yeah.
What is that?
So Sonder is essentially this realization. Everyone that you pass by has a life that's as complex as your own. So you go through your own life and they really don't know like how you've come to this stage. And other people have also done the same, but it's completely different. So that this is where a lot of like judgment happens, because they only see the current state, but they don't even see how that current state came to be. So Sonder kind of inspired my research in the sense that I really became interested in how and why we all have these different beliefs, and how some beliefs can really turn into like mental health experiences and others just don't. Okay, so we've talked about these human experiences, we've talked about human psychology, but what is actually the scientific backing and psychological backing of all of these experiences? And so I want to invite experts ranging from like psychiatrists, psychologists, neuroscientists, as well as people from industry working at the intersection of artificial intelligence and mental health. So lots of people can kind of like bring insight into all of this. But I know I mentioned experts too, right? But I think we all are our own experts. So even bringing on people that have kind of experienced these like spiritual experiences, conspiratorial experiences, like psychics, like there's people that have gone through these things that kind of like, I wouldn't say, or basically are challenged by it. I want them to kind of provide their like first person experience so we can kind of like understand what's going on. That's why it's important to kind of balance the clinical and computational.
Mental health awareness, I can see, right?
Exactly, yeah. So
about that.
Awareness is very important. This is like one of the core motivations for doing a podcast. Instead of sticking with just the research, but also making things aware. This is an amazing thing that Phil does, right? Like he doesn't only do the research, right? He kind of tweets about it. He wants people to kind of know what he's working on and what we're working on.
So it's some translation of the research from the paper level or at the computer program to translation in language for humans that we can all share and communicate and have a higher understanding.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's basically going from this idea of like labels to language, kind of, right?
Labels to language.
Yeah. So we'll talk more about that. After phase 2, once we bring all these experts, we'll get a better sense of how the future is moving, where the future is moving, the future of mental health. And this is where I'll start talking about the current efforts to kind of provide better mental health care, and then where the future will go. And this is basically PSYGNALZ. So there are two paths that one could take in my situation, which is you can do your scientific research, you can write papers, like get into the science, and then once it's kind of established, start a company. That's one path. Another path is when people are like involved in some work, say research, you kind of build an intuition for what's inside, some richness that's inside. And this is what I'm kind of feeling right now. So I've embarked on this like novel way of kind of analyzing our data. And I feel like there's something there that could just be generalized to kind of improve a lot of people's lives. And I'm like, let me start this now, build certain momentums by like creating websites, doing podcasts, and then have like this underlying motivation of, okay, people know the face of the person that's kind of building this and the team that's kind of a part of this, and kind of like the intrinsic motivation for all of this.
How is this new method, this analytical method will help lives?
Sure, yeah. So now...
If you can tell us about more, what is the analytical method that you're thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. So now we're kind of transitioning from podcast, right, to PSYGNALZ. So this kind of goes back into... Let me give a little bit of backstory first, okay? So before talking about the content and the science, let me actually talk about the name, okay? So it goes back to chess. So I've always been the one to kind of find hidden patterns, not only in like data, but also just in life in general. And I think this came from me being a competitive chess player. And because at every moment during a game, there's always an optimal move to play to win a game. And finding that requires thinking outside the box, right? You just can't think within a frame. And so, again, my dad is also an academic. You've met my dad, and he's also someone I'll bring on as a guest. And he does a lot of signal processing. And he and I always talk about research. We go in depth into so many topics: math, AI, philosophy, astrology, just name it. You can attest to this, but once you go down the research hole, you think so much with your scientific mind. And again, he and I always talk about research. And so one day he and I were talking about using signal processing on psychology data. And so then I was like, one day, I think maybe earlier this year, I sat in front of a computer and it just came to me, like the name itself. So I don't know, there's actually a name for this type of phenomenon that I'm going to tell you. So you've heard of the word motel. Right? So motel is composed of two words, motor and hotel. Similarly, like smog. Smog is composed of
smog.
Smog is like a type of fog, but it's like smoky. So it's composed of two words, smoke and fog.
Okay, I see.
So there's a name for this. The name is actually it's a French word, so you might be able to like correct me on this, but it's portmanteau. Portmanteau.
Portmanteau?
Yeah, Portmanteau.
Okay.
And it's essentially it's a word that describes that when you blend the sounds of two words together.
Okay.
So signals, it's composed of psychology and the word signal. And then Z, it ends with Z because the central unit of all signals or all frequencies is hertz. And so if you put all of these things together, so it's composed of three different concepts, right? Psychology, signal, and then Z for hertz. And I really like one word names, right? And I feel like this word itself really describes the essence of what the company actually kind of potentially holds.
Do you have already registered the name and all of that?
Yeah, everything is all registered.
Nice.
So it's like, these are as I was mentioning, building the momentum. So I had this vision and I was like, I could stick to just the vision, but in order for something to become a reality, you have to keep pushing that vision towards that. And I'm just grateful for having the support system to kind of like support me with all of this.
Using this analytical framework that describes signals to improve mental health awareness, but also understanding.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. So it's currently a futuristic idea, right? Of using signals generated from different types of sources. So I think of the world as composed of two things, right? Basically sources and signals. And what I mean by that is, let's take a very intuitive example. I'm sure you've skipped rocks before. So when you throw a rock, you see these types of ripples in the water. So the rock itself, the object, the source, is kind of generating these signals, which are the ripples. So now let's translate that into kind of the clinical setting. So we have our brain. Our brain is one of the main sources of these signals. We know these alpha waves, beta waves, gamma waves, and these are kind of linked to certain types of cognition. But we also have the heart. You have S wave, P wave, QRS complex, all these different signals. And then we also have these games that we were talking about. So when you play these games, you're not making one decision, but you're making multiple decisions across time. So when you make decisions across time, you create these types of time series or signals, right? So the idea then is to kind of use these signals from all these different sources to provide some kind of like personalized mental health intervention. And this is the challenge that you've brought up, which is we have this analytical approach to kind of dissect these signals from all of these different sources. But then we have to make this jump from this analytical approach to how can we translate that into the clinical setting and how can people kind of use that. So right now, my intuition is we use AI to kind of understand these signals, right? So again, it's more so kind of seeing the vision of something that's already out there that we can use to kind of leverage what we're finding. So hopefully as the podcast progresses, I'll have more of a deeper understanding of how to kind of leverage this. But right now it's this idea that we're just all composed of signals. So why can't we use signals that are on a spectrum to study something else, which is psychiatry that's also on a spectrum, which is something that will go in.
Are people in the past have studied or using a similar framework to study mental health? I can imagine that a lot of people have thought about using, as you said, temporal series produced by humans, either in games or in EEGs or in any other metric.
Absolutely, yeah.
Are there not other people who have done this before?
100%, yeah. So when people think of signals or frequencies, they think of immediately the brain. But this is where the distinction between invasive signals versus non-invasive signals comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
There are many products out there that kind of fit some kind of cap, understand the signals, and kind of say, okay, this person has depression or not, or no depression,
Mm-hmm.
right? But all of these like interventions are invasive. There are also non-invasive methods out there that, for example, a cap would kind of be non-invasive.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea of being at the comfort of your home, just playing these games, and then generating these signals that could potentially be used as a way to kind of read your mental health is something that's very futuristic, I think.
Mm-hmm.
There are companies that are working towards this, but it's not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly because there's overlaps like with all these different illnesses. So once this is something we'll get into, which is a term called heterogeneity, which you know of. And it's this idea that you have multiple different mental health disorders out there with these different symptoms. Many of these disorders share similar symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't necessarily, it's not a one-to-one. But the data, to me, is kind of showing that signals is a method that can reach the granular level to kind of potentially build this one-to-one connection.
Mm.
And it becomes even more rich when you combine all these different sources, from the behavior, from the brain to the body, because it doesn't only stop at the heart, the brain, and the behavior, right? You have your skin signals, you have your eye signals, you have your gut signals. So imagine like there's no research done on, like, for example, the gut and skin, for example, with those signals. So,
and the idea is to use as many signals as possible from one individual to have a very precise diagnosis or precise potential intervention at some point.
This touches on the idea of multimodality. So when you mix different types of models or modals, from like behavior to brain to body, you will improve on the signals, right? Because you find these different patterns, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's all pattern recognition, right? So once you have like this entire space, and if you try to combine these different features, you're more likely to kind of find some kind of pattern.
Have you heard about the Bonini's paradox?
I have not, no. What is it again?
Bonini. I
I
think it might be Italian.
Okay.
The paradox that when a model is too complex, can describe everything.
Okay.
But the user ability to interpret the model, given the complexity, is very low. But on the other side, if you have a very simple model, it's very unlikely to explain reality or to predict reality.
Okay.
But for the user, it's very easy to use, so very easy to understand and to make theories about.
Sure.
So there is this trade-off between how we use a model and how, as a very simple model cannot describe everything, but a very complex model describes everything, but we can all understand how it's working.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I can imagine that when you could reach many levels of analysis of signals, you might be facing a problem of complexity that,
like, it's
I
like
don't
a
know,
black
how
box
can you
type thing, right? Yeah. So I mean, I guess you're touching on this idea of like we're advancing artificial intelligence by using something that's a black box, right? So once this artificial intelligence reaches a level of explainability, you're like, how did this AI kind of reach to that conclusion, right? The human level interpretation is very difficult. And yeah, it makes sense, right? So this is something I've been thinking about, in the sense that all these companies, right, that are based off of artificial intelligence, right, are they also focused on recognizing human reliance on artificial intelligence? Because, for example, ChatGPT, lots of people are now using ChatGPT. Once, not only ChatGPT, but other softwares too, right? Once all of these softwares just go down, I feel like people will start having this itch. Just like if you lose your phone, right? You're like, where's my phone? Like, I need it. I'm losing in touch of the world, right? This is something I don't want happening with any type of startup or company that I'm involved in. Because when you attach artificial intelligence to one's own mental health, there might be a point where it's like hard to like kind of detach. So the reason why I brought this up is because of this idea that you mentioned. Yeah, I mean, it could definitely become a black box for sure. But I think just this idea alone, I just think it's just fascinating to just think about. Like people are doing this, right? Like using musical frequencies to kind of like heal their mind. Like, for example, if some people are suffering with insomnia, you can listen to a certain type of frequency, musical frequency, and you can just feel that you can go to sleep better. So there's some kind of science there. And I think this is something that's kind of further inspiring this idea of using signals for mental health too. Like there's ideas there, but maybe there's no hardcore scientific evidence yet for that.
Also, there's another point that I might imagine that it doesn't matter that if you have the black box problem.
Yeah.
Because if you want, for example, to help mental health diagnosis,
yeah,
you can have a black box and you can have a better prediction of mental health.
Okay.
So, and if you have a better prediction of mental health, why you need to understand the black box? If you have already a good prediction, right?
Sure.
You are already helping people. So maybe the black box problem, it might be not a problem anymore.
No.
If you have a potential outcome that is good for the community.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I think having a full understanding of an entire pipeline might also be risky for like cyber attacks, right? So it might be important to kind of keep things as a black box, right? Because if it's difficult for humans to kind of interpret, there are challenges with anything, right? But this could be kind of like a advantageous thing for humans, right? Because if it's difficult for someone to understand the black box, it's also difficult to hack that black box to kind of, this goes into like the privacy issues of kind of building these types of mental health interventions. But yeah, you raise a good point. Like, as long as the outcome is there, why potentially understand the process, right? But I think there is some advantage to understanding the process to improve the entire outcome too, right? So we were talking about potential innovative startup idea. And I think with any innovation comes like literal thinking outside the box. You can't just think like everyone. And so have you heard of this candle problem?
Oh, what is that?
So there's this classic psychological test by this German psychologist, Karl Duncker. And so just imagine you're sitting at a table next to a wooden wall, okay? And you're given 3 equipments, okay? 3 items. A candle, some thumbtacks that are in a cardboard open container.
What is that?
So thumbtacks are basically those pins that you kind of hook, like if you want to put papers on the wall, you put like these thumbtacks.
Okay, I see.
And then a box of matches. Okay, so you have a candle, you have thumbtacks in a container, and then you have a box of matches. And the goal is to kind of fix the candle to the wall so that the wax doesn't drip. Okay, how would you go about doing this? So you're sitting at a table, wooden wall, you have a candle, you have thumbtacks in a container, and a box of matches. How would you put the candle, fix the candle on the wall such that the wax does not drip onto the floor or onto the table?
So I guess I would use the box to hold the wax.
Okay.
And I would put the box on the wall with the thumb taps.
Okay.
Thumb tags.
Yep, thumb tags.
And or also I would have a layer of matches on the top, so they work like a barrier.
Amazing, yeah. So
like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's basically it, right? But the thing is, so many people think to tack the candle on the wall, but that just fails. Others basically think of lighting the match and then melting the side of the candle and then trying to stick the candle onto the wall, but that also fails. But your solution is exactly what people kind of the idea of this experiment is, which is functional fixedness. So functional fixedness is this idea that you shouldn't look at one object and seeing only one function, right? Because many people might think, okay, that cardboard container was just for those thumbtacks. You thought of it as a platform for the candle, right?
Okay.
So yeah, so it's important to think outside the box, right? So this is a nice segue to the next segment, which is rethinking mental health nosology. Okay, so just for the viewers, nosology is essentially the study of classifying mental health. And so you already know some of these, right? So we have something called the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, right? So it's essentially a dictionary of all of these mental health disorders, with each defined as some kind of symptom. And as we were talking, there's this idea of heterogeneity where lots of these disorders may share symptoms. So there's a risk for misdiagnosis if we just purely focus on this DSM idea. And then what they realized was mental health disorders are not categorical. They should not be labeled. They're on a dimension, so it should be dimensional. So then they created something called the RDoC. And this is essentially a matrix that's not only focused on like genetic factors, neurological factors, but also societal factors, cultural factors too, that could affect mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they, at the same time, they developed something called HiTOP. It's like the hierarchical taxonomy of psychiatry.
Mm-hmm.
And so here they're basically saying that there's a lot of co-occurrences of all these symptoms. There's kind of hierarchical. So you might have depression, you might have anxiety, but within that, you have fear and you have worry, for example. So all of these things are kind of overlapped, right? So the history of all of this is basically highlighting this idea of from labels to language. And so it's kind of reducing the stigma of associating mental health to this word called disorder. So I feel like mental health experiences should feel less like a disorder, but more like a continuum of human experiences.
But there is the case that, I mean, even we all have these dimensions of psychopathology. I might have some more what is it? Schizotypy, a little bit more schizotypy, a bit more anxiety, or in multiple different ways.
Yeah.
There is a categorical point where people are suffering and they go to the hospital or to see a doctor.
Sure.
So even though we all have many expressions of our experience which might relate with psychopathology, at some point there is a categorical distinction that people seek for help and other people don't, right?
Absolutely.
So there is this two continuous in nature, but with a categorical society institutionalized problem.
No, absolutely, yeah. So, but I think going to a clinician or not going to a clinician, yes, that is categorical. The understanding of that diagnosis that they're going for needs a dimensional or continuum understanding, right? And I don't know. Again, another reason for why I'm motivated with this idea of signals is because, as I was mentioning to you, all of mental health, all of psychiatry is on a spectrum, right? From non-clinical to clinical, non-severe to severe. And so why not study a method or some idea for something that's also on a spectrum? So signals, by nature, is on a spectrum, from low frequency to high frequency, from alpha waves to gamma waves, right? And so I just feel like by nature, this is an idea that could definitely, at a granular level, kind of help us understand at a more accurate level to provide more personalized treatment, right? And so the reason why I mentioned like DSM, RDoC, HiTOP is kind of just to show where the future of mental health is kind of leading towards, right? And I think personally, there should be a classification model purely mapping these different signals from different sources to these different types of psychopathology. And then the outcome is either, yes, you go to a clinician or you don't go to a clinician. Yeah, so I think that is like a quick segment on like rethinking mental health nosology. But I feel like you also kind of agree, like people should not focus on just symptoms, right?
Yeah. For the disorder idea,
or the disorder,
right?
exactly. They should think of it more as a continuum of human experience, right?
Yeah. We all share.
That we all share, exactly. Okay, so now we're talking about psychology, psychiatry, but let's talk about the person, like us. So we're driven, we have ambition, we have purpose, right? Or at least building purpose, right? There is this experiment by a psychologist, another psychologist, Harry Harlow. Have you heard of Harry Harlow before?
I think he's not the guy of the monkeys.
Yeah. So you might have heard this story, but he's from University of Wisconsin, 1940, and he established one of the first primate labs. And so he was really interested in learning, and he put together this mechanical device. And this mechanical device requires 3 steps, which is removing a vertical pin, undoing a hook, and then lifting a cover. As humans, we can do that, right? Hopefully you can do that, right? It's a very simple device. And what he did was he put this device in a monkey cage and wanted to see what the monkeys would do. So to his surprise, the monkeys immediately started playing with it. And then after like a few minutes or so, like they were able to figure it out. And they kept playing it. So the thing is, nobody trained the monkeys, and nobody gave the monkeys any reward. And back then, they knew there were two types of drive. Biological drive, you eat when you're hungry, you drink when you're thirsty, and something called incentivized drive. So you'll work harder if I promise that there will be a raise in your pay.
Mhm.
But they gave monkeys reward, but they would still play these games. So then Harry was like, there has to be some kind of other drive in addition to these two drives. And what he said was the performance of the task provided some kind of intrinsic motivation. So just by the joy of the task, by playing it, they felt motivated to keep playing it. So this is the idea of intrinsic drive. So you have innate drive, incentivized drive, and intrinsic drive.
Mhm.
So my intrinsic drive is the hope that the day will come when one day people will feel supported in their own way when they need it. And it goes back to this idea of Sonder that I mentioned. So let me ask you, like, what would you say your intrinsic drive is for, or your drive for like just living, or just
That's a good question that I don't often think about, but
Yeah.
I guess the component of belonging and helping,
okay,
which I think they are very intrinsically linked.
yeah,
That makes me do things I think.
okay,
I guess another insight is that I feel always the urge to, in addition to my normal work, try to do volunteering in extra projects that
I
does
see
not
that,
have
yeah.
explicit rewards, but
Yeah.
I can feel that there is an extra help for community that can be done there.
absolutely, yeah,
Yeah, and also this idea that my time is not completely mine, but it's just what is it? It's not a benefit, but it's a privilege that I have been granted,
yeah,
and that time sometimes should be also in favor of the common good.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Something like that, I would say.
Yeah, my dad talks about this idea of like infinite feature space, right? Like when you
Mhm.
have an idea, is it actually your own idea? Like, this goes like into philosophy, but like when you get your idea, you're getting it from some kind of like space, right?
Mhm.
With all of your experiences that you've gone through and involvement in different things, and then you generate these ideas.
Mhm.
So you have this privilege of having this idea come to you, kind of, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're kind of getting at.
Yeah.
And next question would be like your definition of success. So my definition of success is when science meets service. So advancing the sciences and sharing the knowledge is great. We're doing that. We're at the forefront of that. But when it translates into practical benefits that improve lives, I think there's some kind of deeper fulfillment there. And I think that is what I'm kind of like striving for. And I hope one day like that comes to fruition.
Mhm.
So what would you say your
So this like
definitions?
success in general for science,
I
or
think
because
yeah.
I would think that this is already what science does.
Okay.
I mean, for instance, vaccines, for
Sure.
instance, intervention development.
Yeah.
So science is intrinsically providing solutions for the world. I mean, maybe that's the distinction between science and technology. Technology is the application of science to provide solutions.
Sure, yeah. So maybe I should clarify, right? I
Mhm.
was not trying to say that like science in general, the scientific community is not doing that, right? It's more so like I see success as not just only writing papers, right? But having the science that I'm involved in to kind of be a foundation in a product that people use to kind of help improve their lives.
Mhm.
So I don't want to only be on the science side, right? But also on the product side, kind of,
Mhm.
and see people's lives being improved.
Okay, yeah.
And so I relate that to one might relate that success to science alone, but I relate that to life in general.
Yeah.
So
I guess, for my personal case, my girlfriend Sophie,
Yeah.
she's a Kantian philosopher tradition in
Mhm.
her family and all of that. So she believed in the categorical imperatives. I guess a success for somebody would be that every decision that once made, it's the best decision that you could have done in every single time that moment will be repeated for every single person in the world. So if there would be that good action that you will never done something else, that would be the definition of success of a person. I guess this is impossible, but as a aspirational point, I think that would be the definition of success. That if we would decide everything as if that decision would be the best decision in every single case, for every single person, for every single infinite dimension that I would be in. Yeah. And if the decision would be the same and the best, then it was right.
It was right. Oh, okay.
And people that try to do right decisions, I think that would be success. I don't know if I am successful. I don't know if I do the best options, the best actions all the time, but at least trying
absolutely,
to do good things.
Yeah. Good, yeah. And I feel like everyone's definition of success has an underlying theme. And it seems like happiness, peace. And I feel like for me, when this happens, when science meets service, I feel a sense of happiness, peace.
The right things to do, the right values.
Right values, exactly. Okay, cool. So I think, like what to expect now, right? So this is obviously our first episode. And the intended audience is everyone. There's no real one audience for this podcast, right? We're speaking on human experience, human psychology. So it's just everyone. So we all have cool experiences to share. And
can you tell us? I don't know. I'm curious about who are going to be the next guest. Do you have any idea?
So there are. I don't want to drop any names though, but the types of people that will come.
Okay,
I'll definitely drop. So a couple of cool guests are like psychics.
Nice.
Psychics will be coming, and even having like a conspiracy theorist debating with a scientist who studies conspiracies.
That's
right.
Cool.
So me being kind of like a moderator while they like talk about their beliefs. We'll also have experts from academia to industry come and chat about cool research they're working on, from vibrating capsules to kind of study like gut sensitivity. Basically, when you have this gut feeling, what does that actually mean? So there's this guy at UCLA who's like studies this. So he'll, I'm hoping to invite him to come out and speak on this clinical trial that he's involved in.
Yeah, cool.
And then also, as you mentioned, a guy in UK, Daniel Freeman, I don't know if he's still there, but using virtual reality to kind of study phobias. To even, there's a guy that I know who knows a clinician who learned hypnotism to kind of help his wife that had psychosis, which was interesting. I want to know his story, like how, like, what does it mean to kind of like learn hypnotism and psychology, right? And like there are also experts like outside of academia and industry that kind of are just interested in putting together like cool inventions, right? There's this guy that put together like this musical chair that emitted frequencies to kind of like heal the mind, right? And just bringing people on that like kind of do these cool things. And of course, like we'll dig deeper into the future of mental health with PSYGNALZ, talk about the various services. I'm working on like this business plan. And then there's some services associated with this. And I'm hoping like maybe in a year or two, like have the viewers, the world to kind of like see what this is all about and like kind of figure out who would be interested in like benefiting from it, right? So so that's basically it. So bringing like all these various people, but not only restricting it to like scientific experts, right? But also like the people that kind of experience these
lived
things.
Experience people as well.
Yeah. So that is what I'm expecting. But like you're the first guest.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's great.
That's me. I'm so glad that
I look forward to hear the next podcast.
Absolutely, yeah. And hopefully you'll come out to like different episodes too.
Yeah,
like
of course.
We'll chat more. We'll go deeper into the research. We'll go deeper into like what we're actually doing.
I'd love to come by.
Yeah, and then you're also involved in like other like startups, so we can like even talk about.
Yeah, I'd love to.
So thank you again, Santiago. So you've been such a great friend since moving to Yale from Oxford, and I've always admired like the person that you are. It's like we vibrate on.
We have some frequencies.
Exactly, frequency signals, right? Like you just have this enthusiasm for science, but not only science, but bringing people together. And this is something that should be of of the like at the forefront of mental health. There's a guy that we know, Adam, and he's doing something very similar.
Invite him.
Yeah, I'm gonna invite him. I have a feeling. Yeah, he's gonna come soon. So he's in the intersection of music and the mind, right? And he does the same thing, brings together the mental health community, and he really values this idea of like identity. Like we all have our own identity, right?
Mhm.
Do you have like anything that you'd like to share that the viewers can kind of relate to? So any stories of like you overcoming any like mental health load?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that if some of the hearing people have experienced or are experiencing a difficult situation in their families or in their current lives, so that they know that things will be better
Right.
at some point, and that we all have been there, and they can reach many people, and keep strong.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, cool.
Mm.
Do you have any word of advice to like close this off? Any like?
I guess we all should all read Kant.
Yeah, philosopher, right? Yeah.
We should all read more philosophy.
More philosophy, yeah. You're a philosophical guy.
Yeah, I need to read more, but
yeah. Well, I mean, through this journey, right? Of moving back and forth from a scientist to potential entrepreneur, right? One thing that one quote that's not quote, I would say, but like words that kind of have inspired me is, I'm an introvert, and doing like a podcast like this is just so very, very new, and is actually putting me outside my comfort zone. This idea of like being comfortable, being uncomfortable, right? And so
point.
this is something that I've just this year and moving forward, I think I'm trying to like push for.
That's a good suggestion for the audience as well.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I have one more, which is like a chess reference. Okay. So this is just, I was looking at a chessboard with my good friend Marcus, and I just thought of it. So it's like, and it's kind of something that I've been like going through my entire life, right? Which is sometimes you really need to feel to be a pawn before you can truly appreciate the power of being a queen or a king, right? Because like we need to kind of follow the leaders before you can actually become or know how to kind of lead. So that's what I'd like to kind of end with. But for the viewers at home, like we all have stories to share, and human experience and psychology goes hand in hand. And if you want us to touch on like any specific concepts, just like let us know. Again, these first few episodes will be trial run, so please comment on things that we can improve on, things that we should remove. And yeah, if you guys like this episode, just support us, right? Like, comment, and subscribe, and your support really matters to the success of all of what we're doing. Thank you again, Santiago. Thank you. Or exoteric is more so public teaching, and esoteric is more so like private and secret teaching.
Our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we say that as a sign of respect. There's a story in which he was able to...
For you guys to guess each other's signs.
Very interesting. Okay.
Okay.
Let's do it.
So, on TikTok, it's becoming more of a trend than like a lifestyle, right?
Exactly.
It's like the sum total of our thoughts, choices, and actions. You know what I'm saying? And it's like...
So it's building a vision board, an active manifestation of quantum movement.